Hello, Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Hope you're all safe, sound, and healthy. And now let's just make a few more conclusive points with regards to India and Pakistan, okay? Because I've made all my major points, but there are some other points that I've been making on social media, but I haven't actually mentioned them clearly, you can say, in this podcast. First of all, let me say that right now we are in a sort of a blackout sort of a situation where the it's a self-imposed blackout, you can say. It's not like India did. India literally imposed a blackout for 15 minutes in Delhi a few hours ago, to do some sort of a drill, because obviously they're expecting a retaliation from Pakistan. But here in Pakistan, people are just doing a sort of a self-imposed blackout to make things easier for our army and more difficult for the enemy in case the matter escalates. Now, point being, remember, I've said it 1,000 times that there are a lot of false narratives. Both India and Pakistan are major culprits in that, but India is especially a major culprit. And one of my biggest problems with Pakistan is, contrary to India, Pakistan has never really pushed its narrative forward. The amount of terrorism Pakistan has faced because of India, this is something I talked a few episodes ago, if in some of my previous podcasts. And I do not mind reiterating this point. The fact that Pakistan has literally faced a lot of terrorism in Balochistan, in Sindh, in KPK, but especially in Balochistan. We all know the amount of involvement, direct as well as indirect, financial as well as physical, of the Indian raw agents in Pakistan committing terrorism. Okay, India is a hotbed of terrorists. This is something that is known to the whole of South Asia. India is actually the most hated country in this region, in case you out there in the West had no idea. You're not the only ones who are suddenly realizing that you hate Indians. The truth is, India has been the most hated country in Asia. India is the America of Asia. This is again something that I've said a million times on social media, and I think I've mentioned it in some of my podcasts earlier, previously, maybe a year ago or something. In any case, point being that India is the most hated country in this region. There is not a single neighbor that India has not disturbed. Forget China, which is a huge country, and still India wants to always mess with it. India is constantly messing with Pakistan, obviously, and India has occupied Kashmir illegally, and India has been trained by the Mossad to emulate every single step that Israel has done in Palestine, here in the occupied Kashmir. The fact that India literally staged the attack in Kashmir and then used that as an excuse to wage war in Pakistan, or to sort of, do a sort of a face saving dance that it always seems to do. And it enjoys this face saving dance with our government. It has enjoyed it for years. Remember, as I've said before, as long as you've got Nawaz Sharif in the government, expect these things to happen. You should always expect India to ask Pakistan for a favor, to be dragged into this whole bullshit, and to help save India's government's face amongst its people, and in the region, by allowing India to strike, by allowing India to insult or offend Pakistan, and just Pakistan should not retaliate. This has always been, the norm that they've been trying to set, which is something we should not allow to be set. Because remember, this is again something we've seen even in cricket, the way India politicized cricket and fucked the shit out of it. So much so that I actually stopped watching cricket altogether completely, since they forced us to give a win to Sachin Tendulkar because he was about to get retired and he never had a win. So we were threatened, the Indian Muslims were threatened, the Kashmiris were threatened, and all for what? To give their Hindu Sachin Tendulkar, captain of the team, who never had a win in his history, who was about to retire, in order to give him a win. As I've said even that time, a stolen win is not a win. at the end of the day. At the end of the day, he knows, his team knows that they did not earn that win, you know. And the fact that our president, the then president and prime minister, we had Zardari and we had Galani, actually physically go there to the stadium to make sure that our team lost. That was very disheartening for the Pakistani team. I can still not forget that. And the fact that the Indian government and the media, the way they lie, the way they exaggerate, the way they falsify facts, it is so pathetic. And I've noticed the deterioration of the Indian mindset. Not that they ever had one, really. I only hear from analysts that India used to have a secular or a good mindset. But to be honest, in all the 30 years that I have seen and dealt with Indians, I think they do not have an intellectual mindset. They do not have a secular mindset, and they're definitely not educated, at least not mentally. I think that they are, again, the American, they are the Americans of Asia. I've said that again a million times before, that the Indian government is the American government of Asia, and their public is the American public of Asia. So you can imagine what I'm saying right now. The fact that their public is so brainwashed, so mentally crippled, so moronic, they're such zombies that they can actually believe whatever shit their media is spouting without actually fact checking, without verifying facts. It's amazing. It's beyond me. I'm not surprised that India has deteriorated to this point that it has, because they really do not use their minds. They really believe everything that their government or their media says. And it's a very small number, a very, very tiny number that actually questions their media or their government or their facts. Whereas on the other hand, Pakistanis, no, even though, mind you, I have a lot of problems with my own people, and as you know, I've complained about them a million times in a million different ways. But in this case, they also never fail to amaze me by the way they do not blindly trust whatever comes to the media. They do not blindly trust the government. We literally question our own authorities, and so we should. We question them, we refuse to believe them, we look for evidence, we look for concrete evidence. As you can see, that even now, even though I know that India attacked Pakistan, I know they killed innocent civilians, but I'm still going to blame my own army for that failure and intervention. Yes, they managed to evacuate the areas. Yes, maybe they managed to take care of everything, but the fact that they allowed these number of missiles to enter the country, and they took their sweet time. To me, they took their sweet time. As far as I'm concerned, they took their sweet time in responding. I don't care that they downed 5 jets, and I don't care that they downed a drone. All I care is that they allowed 26 people to die, which is now 31, and they allowed 46 people to be injured, and they allowed children and women to die in the process. They allowed old people, frail, fragile old people. The Indians were acting exactly like the Israelis, celebrating and all. The fact that this is something that I've also put on social media, that the way, when you look at the way the Pakistanis are commenting on this situation, and you look at the way the Indians are commenting, I'm sorry, but you see a vast intellectual difference here. So I don't know if those Indians are, again, part of, I think I mentioned this in my podcast, I don't know if they're, just plain morons, or if they are deliberately acting like morons on behalf of the government media cell that is being operated. I don't know. But you can see the utter ignorance, the utter illiteracy, the utter lack of intelligence. And you can see the barbarism. You can see their thirst for violence. You can see their extreme Nazi Hinduism coming through. And that is very disturbing, because the India that claims that it has the largest number of Muslims in the subcontinent, yeah, you know what? Nobody cares about that, because at the end of the day, they're apparently not large enough, because you can actually successfully threaten them to control Pakistan, which is something you have been doing for even something as measly as a cricket match. You've done that. And even now, because you know that no matter what, our army will not attack occupied Kashmir because why would we? They're your victims. So you are trying to take advantage of that fact. Plus, again, even if you wanted to save your face and you wanted our army and government to cooperate with you, you should have stayed within your limits. You should have limited your attacks to the occupied land. You should have limited your attacks to the border. You had no right to overplay your hand. You had no right to get overconfident, and you had no right to cross that threshold of attacking Punjab, of attacking civilian areas in various parts of Pakistan. This is again something I said in my previous podcast, I know. But the reason I'm repeating these facts is because these are facts that actually show the Indian mindset, it shows the Indian aggression. And the fact that Israel is the only country that is openly defending India also tells you a lot. Any country that is defended by Israel, you know, you already know where that country stands in history. It stands on the wrong side of history. Okay. So India is now, or even if anybody who just doesn't even know what's going on, I think the parameters are very clear. If Israel is with you, you're on the wrong. It's as simple as that. Okay. I think that can be a very good way to measure. Now, keeping all of that in mind, when we move on to false narratives and we move on to hate mongering, by the Indian government and the Indian media, and then as you know, and then you look at the fact that they literally lie. They keep on lying to their people. This is something that has pissed me off for decades, to be honest, for decades. And they have lied about things that are literally on the record. And the fact that the Indian public still listens to those lies and then tries to spread those lies, that is just so interesting, so amusing, and very, very concerning, because you're dealing with people who refuse to see the truth that is on the record, and they would much prefer to spread the lies that their government has spread. Like the Mumbai attacks is one of them. I actually saw a whole documentary with evidence as to how the Indian government was behind it. The contradictory facts that I myself found while they were, you know bringing out the news, while they were updating us on the news, the exact same contradictions were given in great detail in that documentary with evidence, showing that yes, these questions were actually the correct questions, that if they came to anybody's mind, these were indeed questions that one needed to have looked into. And when you found the answers to these questions, you knew. In fact, at that time, even the CIA had said that although India tried to blame the CIA and Pakistan for the Mumbai attacks, but the CIA actually also gave a statement in which they said that they had nothing to do with it, and neither was there evidence of Pakistan's involvement, and that this was in fact, if anything, there was ample evidence to prove that it was a false flag operation. And keeping that in mind, when you see how India keeps on and on lying to its people, saying that, oh, Pakistan encroached upon the border, oh, Pakistan is a terrorist state, and the fact that Indians are so ignorant that they do not even know that India is officially a terrorist state in this region of Asia. If you talk to Bangladeshis, India is a terrorist state. If you talk to Nepal, India is a terrorist state. If you talk to Sri Lanka, India is a terrorist state. Remember the guerrillas in Sri Lanka? Remember the Tamils in Sri Lanka? What do you think they were doing there, wreaking havoc? Who do you think helped Sri Lanka against them? Pakistan. If you look at even Burma, which is now Myanmar, their whole problem is with Indians. Their problem is not with Muslims, actually. If you go way back into their history, then you will understand that their grudge against Indians is so deep and it runs so old that they actually do not care what religion the Indians belong to. They are actually not even looking at the religion when they're persecuting them. They are persecuting the Indians in their mind. This is how deep rooted that grudge against India is in Myanmar, that they do not care that those people that they're torturing, are and they actually have nothing to do with India anymore. But in their mind, because their ancestors came from India, they are Indians, they have a deep rooted grudge against India. And this is what is driving them wild against the Indian community, the ethnic Indian community there, which have are Muslims, unfortunately for everybody. So when you try to go through, when you strip all these superficial layers and you try to understand the depth beneath what exactly is going on, you would realize that India is a very, very hated country in the region. Indians are hated in the region. I'm sorry, but that's a fact, okay? And the fact that India is always terrorizing their neighbors, that they're always financing terrorism. They finance terrorism in Sri Lanka. In fact, who do you think brought the whole concept of suicide bombers? You always seem to credit the Muslims, but actually the original credit goes to the Tamil Tigers. The extreme Hindu, yeah, the extreme Hindu, how do I say, ethnic community that belongs essentially to the south of India, that decided to live and reside in Sri Lanka. And then they wanted that they should take over Sri Lanka. And then they decided that they owned Sri Lanka. And then they decided that they should divide Sri Lanka and have their own state. And they terrorized the people of Sri Lanka for a long time. And they were your bona fide suicide bombers, by the way. So, you need to understand the history of things before you jump into this. This just shows how much disinformation and misinformation is spread by false narratives, by governments, just to, further their agendas. And as I said, my biggest problem that I always had with Pakistan was, why did Pakistan never, ever, ever make such a fuss or a hue and cry about the Indian terrorism activated in Pakistan for decades? The way India screams blue murder without even evidence and then chooses to attack Pakistan, violating international law, violating human rights, killing civilians, targeting civilian areas. You are telling me that that is supposed to be okay? No. Just because Pakistan never made such a fuss after all the attacks we suffered in Balochistan or in KPK or in Sindh or in Karachi, you're telling me that Pakistan deserves to suffer? No. But yes, Pakistan deserves to be criticized. The government of Pakistan deserves to be heavily criticized for the fact that it never, ever, ever exposed Indian aggression, Indian terrorism in Pakistan very openly, the way India is always trying to drag Pakistan's name. India needs to remember that, after all, India too is an equal culprit. The amount of attacks staged in Azad Kashmir by India, the amount of violations of LOC by India, and as always, India violates the LOC and then it spreads all over the media that, oh, Pakistan violated the LOC, we're retaliating. The fact that they are always lying to their people and lying to the international community, it is pathetic. Listen, if you have the guts to do something, do it openly. Have the guts to admit that you're doing something, and then have the guts to get a response. Have the courage to bear the consequences of your actions. That is a beef that I have with India as well. Not only that it's always propagating, and it's propagating with false narratives, but every time it resorts to violence against Pakistan and it overplays its hand, then it literally shits its pants. That's the only thing I can say about it. It shits its pants because within 24 hours, you find out that now India is talking to the UK and the USA and asking them to pressurize Pakistan against retaliation, and that cannot be. That just cannot be. We don't want to be another Syria. We don't want to be another Libya. We don't want to be another Egypt or Lebanon, because that just shows you, if the UK and the USA will always want Pakistan never to retaliate against Indian aggression. I mean, what message are you trying to give us? That alone tells us that you are not our friends and that you're not actually helping us de escalate, but you are trying to give leverage to India to further exploit Pakistan so that Pakistan should always keep quiet. And that is the problem that I have with Pakistan, because many a times Pakistan actually did cave in. They did cave in, and especially when you have Nawaz. Again, that is my biggest problem with every time you have Nawaz Sharif in the government, Pakistan is forced to cave in because Nawaz Sharif's friendship apparently with the Indian government, the traitor that he is, which is why I always say he needs to be tried for treason, because he is an Indian asset. And India has very openly said it, that they have spent billions on him, they have invested a lot in him, and that he is an asset. And he has proved it again and again. The amount of Indian spies that were given jobs in his factories just so that they could be allowed to enter in and do their dirty work, you know. Your own prime minister is a spy of your enemy country. Listen, nobody minds friendship. You want to be friends with India, do it transparently, be on the up and up. This dirty politics, this toxic relationship that you people have been playing out for the past few decades, in which you scratch my back, I scratch your back, and at the expense and detriment of the people. As I said, the Pakistani people surprisingly have more common sense when it comes to these things as compared to the Indians, who prove themselves to be utter fools and uneducated, illiterate. Obviously, literacy is a problem in India. I'm sorry, but if you tell me to believe that literacy is not a problem in India, no, that's going to be difficult. Look at the population of India, look at the size of India. As you know, India has a problem with Bihar, India has a problem with Punjab, India has a problem with Assam, India has a problem with Kashmir, India has a problem with 2 to 3 other states, and these are all those states that originally were supposed to come to Pakistan in any case, and India occupied these 4 states, okay, by force. India has never been one country, never was. I'll remind you again, it's the Mughals that united you, and the British could not maintain that unity. So you ended up breaking up again. But you know what? You're lucky that you broke up into just 3 major pieces, because you were not just 3 pieces when the Muslims found you. You were a tiny million different fighting, warring states. And if the Muslims never came and united you as one, you would never have been India. Who made India India? It's the Muslim rulers, like it or not. Try to change your history as many times as you want, but this is a fact. Who could not handle it? The British. And anyway, the British are not like the Muslim rulers. Remember, the Muslim rulers, wherever they went, they united those places, and then they used the resources of those places to develop those places. But the British, the French, the Spanish, wherever they went, they divided those places, they broke them up because they could not work with a successful country, and then they had to loot from those places. It's not like they wanted to actually, work on those places. The only reason they occupied those countries was to loot and plunder. So why would they want them to stay united? And even now, India, that considers itself a huge state, a future leader, blah, 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 India right now is the biggest slave to the Western masters. India is no different from Pakistan. I'm sorry, but I don't see India being any different from Pakistan. I think India is just as moronic as Pakistan, just as backward, just as regressed. If anything, it's worse. If you look at the mindset, it's worse. So the Indian media needs to stop. But again, the Indian media is heavily censored, so it doesn't have a choice. Okay, so let's just move forward to the Indian people. You need to stop being stupid. You need to look for alternative media, okay? And you need to stop shitting on the social media, exposing your demented mentality, your Israelite mentality, your Zionist Nazi mentality. You need to stop exposing yourself to the world, celebrating on children's deaths and women's deaths and old people's deaths and civilian deaths. You are a terrorist state. Just like how the Americans do not know the status of America until they travel out. I think you Indians, you need to travel out to find out how much you are hated and for what reasons, you know, and how you behave when you go abroad and why people have a problem with you. It's not racist. You and your government, you immediately scream racism. It's not racism. It's your behavior. It's your Nazi arrogance. I'm sorry, but yes, you behave like bloody Nazis wherever you go. You run around rampant thinking that you're an ancient civilization. You're not. That's another news. China is an ancient civilization too. Egypt was an ancient civilization too. Iraq was an ancient civilization too. In fact, Iraq, the Mesopotamian civilization is even older than yours. Don't try to start, don't start with people like that. Don't go around. I mean, the fact that India wants to take credit for everything is also weird. It's really weird. You're not the first religion on earth. If anything, if you actually studied the archives and the records, the first ever religion was a monotheist religion. You were the first ever rebels, if that's what you want to call it. If you want to take the credit for being the first ones ever, then okay, you're the first rebels, the first followers of Satan that decided to deviate from monotheism and move on to idolatry. Okay. And you decided to, worship your dead forefathers, and that's how it all started. So, okay, you can take credit for that if that's what it is. But don't try to say that you're the oldest religion. You're not the oldest religion. The oldest religion is, in fact, a monotheist religion, always was. Okay. So, I mean, these are the kind of stupid things that you see. It's just as stupid as you see the Israelis moving around making these weird ass claims about themselves that simply are not true. Putting them on a false record doesn't make them true. Changing history in writing doesn't change history in actual fact. Rewriting history doesn't change it in actual fact. And that is the thing that India and America and Israel have been trying to do. And it just shows how desperate they are. As I said, the kind of people that we are too heavily bent on criticizing our own government, will criticize our own army, will criticize our own authorities, our own system, before we turn and criticize somebody else. But the fact that the Indian mind is so repressed, that it just, you can feed anything you want to into their brains, and they're like, oh, and it doesn't matter how many truths you show them, doesn't matter how many facts, how much evidence you put in front of them, they will say no. We will still drink the piss of the cow and we'll still eat the shit of the cow, because that's what our leaders, the extreme Hindutva, whatever they are, that's what they have told us. What happened to education? What happened to secularism? What happened to, democracy? It's amazing. It's amazing how it's so easy to suddenly regress. you know it's pitiful. It's very pitiful. The fact that the Indians are, even today, they haven't learned their lesson. They still haven't learned to verify facts. They haven't learned to read the truth. They haven't learned to criticize themselves, to criticize their government, to criticize their system. They've never learned to ask their government, hang on, that's all fine and dandy that you want to have skirmishes with Pakistan, but what about us? When will our turn come? When will you look after our rights? When will you take care about our domestic issues? You know. So yeah, this is a problem that I've always had with India, and I've reiterated this problem in many different ways. Because you need to call a spade, okay? And India really needs to sweep before its own door. It really needs to work on itself. As I said, it's amazing how just a few months ago, literally till 2 weeks ago, the Indian army was lamenting on the fact that if it ever was pushed into war with Pakistan, it wouldn't last 4 days. you know. And now you go and you decide to over overplay your hand and cross that threshold and you attack civilian areas in Pakistan, you know, and now you're shitting your pants and you're going around asking other countries to pressurize Pakistan to not retaliate. You crazy? You did the act. Sit back now and face the consequence, because for the Pakistani army, as I said, we're already pissed off at our army. Okay, we're already very, very pissed off at our army. And I can tell you for sure that if Imran Khan was right now in the government, first of all, you wouldn't have even dared to attack us. Why? Because our government wouldn't have been in cahoots with you. Right now, we have a treacherous government that most probably allowed you, permitted you to do a face saving dance right here. But you, as I said, you went overboard. You went overboard, you overplayed your hand, and now you're shitting your pants because you know you have to face the consequences. But you know what? You shouldn't have overplayed your hand. When our government was nice enough to help you save your face, you should have showed some restraint. It's as simple as that. So now our army needs to do some face saving, because now our army is under heavy scrutiny because we're pissed off. We're already suspecting that you guys had a backdoor dealing. And the fact that they allowed you to go so far, the fact that you did not know your place and they did not put you in your place, and that they allowed you to do some damage before they took their sweet time and retaliated, that has pissed us off even more. And it has made us even more suspicious. So, yeah, now it's actually very, very important for them to retaliate. And it's equally important for you to sit back and take it. You need to sit back and take it, because you cannot afford a war with us. We cannot afford a war, but you also cannot afford a war with us. You have already suffered a loss in billions overnight. And strangely, we caused you that loss without spending a penny, as per the records. Okay, in downing your 5 jets and a drone, which obviously now you will try to lie your way out of. But hello, at least of the 3 of them, or actually 4 of them, including the one that fell in South Kashmir, occupied Kashmir, those 4 are proof right there. The 5th one, you can try to make any lie you want to and dispute the fact. But those 4 right there, no matter what kind of lie you want to spin, it is a fact that they correspond to what our army has said. So, and the drone also corresponds to what our army has said. So again, as I said, you can make up whatever lie it is that you want to, but it will not fly, not this time. So even if you try to wriggle out of it, those 3 downed jets in any case are a huge loss. And as I said, we didn't actually spend money downing them. So it was really very simple. If you want to go into specifics, the Pakistani military has given us specifics. So they have named 3 Rafale jets and an MiG-29 as well as an Su-30 fighter. Okay, so these are the 5 Indian Air Force jets that they claimed to have shot down. So according to the Pakistan military, a Rafale was brought down in the Pampur area using a Chinese manufactured HQ-9B surface to air missile system. And as I've said before, there have been images and videos that have circulated the social media claiming to show the wreckage in, consistent with these losses. But at the same time, the Indian government has tried to refute these claims, or at least not confirmed it in any case. But additionally, the wreckage of a French-made Mica air-to-air missile still attached to its launcher was found 20 kilometers from Bathinda Air Force Station. So that begs the question, how can India say Pakistan is making false claims? And the other weapon used was the J-10C fighter, which I said in my previous podcast as well, using a PL-15 long-range air-to-air missile while the aircraft was preparing to fire an Israeli-made Rampage standoff missile. So, yeah, that too, that was a Jaguar. Okay, so here we have it. We have a J-10C fighter jet that shot down the Indian Jaguar, and an HQ-9B surface-to-air missile system used to shoot down the Rafale. Okay, so these, you can't get any more specific, to be honest. And when you're being very, very specific, then it begs the question that how much of a lie can it be? You know. So right now, our army is expected to retaliate tonight, or if they decide to add a little suspense to the whole drama, next night, who knows? Because they're like, okay, if India thought that they could choose the time and location and just cherry pick whatever it is that they wanted to do, so it's now Pakistan's turn to give India that, uh, you know. And in India's case, it would be a desperation. In Pakistan's case, because Pakistan had already known about it and were preparing. Obviously, India also knows about it and is preparing. But obviously, India is more on tenterhooks compared to Pakistan because of the situation that was so obviously aggravated by the Indians. And they're thinking that, oh, if only Nawaz Sharif can intervene on their behalf once again. But the problem is, as I said, right now the army is in a worse place than it ever was in the history of Pakistan, where the people are openly, very openly against the army, so much so that even though, as I said, we will stand against the enemy, but internally, we're still pissed off at the army. We still believe that none of this would have happened. India wouldn't have even dared to do the shit it just did if Imran Khan, the rightful prime minister, the legal prime minister, the voted for prime minister, would have been sitting in his place right now. Because, as I said, he is a leader who believes in dignity. He didn't believe in I scratch your back, you scratch my back, let's play dirty politics at the expense of our people. No. And that is why the Indians had a problem with him. That is why our army had a problem with him. So, there we are. If Imran Khan was right now here, none of this would have happened. So, if anything, if the army thought that it could distract us from Imran Khan and from the issues right now that we're facing, and that we're just going to, fall in line, no, you're mistaken. You're very much mistaken. That's not going to happen. And if you think you're going to use this as a ruse to somehow secret Imran Khan out into some other torture cell in Poonch maybe, and then try to do something or try to get rid of him forever, yeah, you're very mistaken. Because right now, as I said, you just pissed us off even more. This whole charade that you're playing with India, this has already pissed us off. And so our army is right now on the do or die situation, even worse than the Indian government. The Indian government faced itself, it kind of it thought of itself to be in that situation where it was a do or die situation, so they thought they had no other way but to launch an attack. Okay, but you know what, you've put our army in that position now, because now they have no other way than to retaliate. Otherwise, we're going to question their integrity, and this time when we question the suspicion of treason committed by our army and the already many treacherous activities accumulated by them, it's not going to be good for either Pakistan or India. I mean, actually, it's not going to be good for Pakistani army and government. It's going to be very good for the Pakistani people, but it's not going to be very good for India. By the way, before I actually sign out, there's one point that I really need to make, regardless of the whole situation. The hypocrisy of the Pakistani army with regards to the killing of innocent lives is not lost upon me. Okay, in fact, this is one of the first things, one of the reasons why I referred to this as an act of betrayal by the Pakistani army, regardless of the fact that it was India that crossed the boundaries and it was India that crossed the threshold, or, that it was India that attacked. The reason why our army is at fault, as I've said before, is because what were they doing? I feel that they allowed a certain amount of damage to occur to justify whatever it is that they would wish to do later on, to leverage it, to milk it again. But you know what? The biggest thing that really, really got to me? How dare they talk about India being a coward, attacking innocent civilians instead of fighting, their own counterparts in the military. Yeah, how dare they when our own army has been viciously attacking our own innocent civilians? Did our army forget the children whose deaths they caused, the fragile older people whose deaths they caused, the women, the men who they tortured? Have they forgotten the little kid who ultimately passed away waiting for his father, that you imprisoned illegally, sent to jail, tortured him, and then you didn't even let him go to the funeral of his son? Do you remember that, child? Oh, now you want us to mourn? I mean, listen, we will mourn because to us, this is all our children. These are all our innocent lives. But you have no right. You have no right to try to manipulate or milk the situation here and talk about innocent children getting killed by India. The reason we hate you so much is you did to your own people what one would actually expect India. India is a barbaric nation, okay? As I've said before, India has proved itself to be a decadent, regressing, barbaric, pro Nazi, pro Zionist nation. You wouldn't expect them to act in a civilized manner. You will expect them to act in an uncivilized, barbaric manner because, let's face it, where India or where Israel or where the West is concerned, there are no rules to war. Everything is fair in war, but not in Islam. In Islam, there are rules to war. And one of those rules is you cannot attack civilians, you cannot kill trees, you cannot kill animals, you cannot kill innocent people, you cannot enter people's homes. You have to stay and fight with each other, you know, soldiers. They need to fight each other. Nobody's allowed to cross that threshold. But you know what? The West crossed that threshold a long time ago. The Chinese crossed that threshold a long time ago. So did the Japanese. It's been everywhere except for the Muslims. The Muslims were the ones who had the rules and the laws. The others didn't. Okay? So why don't you just look at the mirror? You, allegedly Muslims, what have you been doing to your fellow Muslims, to your own people? You are our servants, you are our watchguards. Not only did you attack your own masters, but then you went ahead and allowed the enemy to attack us. And then you're sitting there milking the situation, talking about how they are cowardly. We know that they're cowardly. It's in their religion to be cowardly, for all I know. That's not even my problem. My problem is you people. Why are you cowardly? Why have you been killing your own people? Why have you been torturing your own people? You are not in the position to talk about cowardice. I'm sorry, you're not. This hypocrisy is what is pissing me off. This is what is letting me think you are responsible for whatever has happened. Why? Because you have been directly doing all of this yourself. Who's to stop you from calling the enemy in and saying, hey, come, help us with this? Who's to stop you? Why should I trust you when you say you didn't work with the enemy and cause this? Why should I trust you? You understand? This is actually a very serious question here that I'm posing. You need to understand the question here, and you don't even have an answer. You need to think about having shame. You're the ones who are shameless. They're the enemy. We expect it from them. What about you, motherfuckers? What the fuck are you? Well, this is me signing out. Khuda Hafiz.